This is how we used to do it in the donut shop. We just dip, and then dip. Look how cute that is. Today I'm gonna show you how to make chocolate glazed donuts, one of my absolute favorite things to make. My first job was in a donut shop when I was 16, and they didn't let us do any of the frying, but on special occasions they would let us decorate the donuts. So that was pretty fun. And in this chapter, I'm gonna show you all the ingredients you need. I'm gonna show you how to make the dough, how to make a nice glaze, and how to cut and fry them perfectly. So the first thing we need to do is heat our milk. We're gonna bring it just to a boil. Milk loves to boil over, so don't walk away. It'll boil over in an instant. So I can see there are little bubbles right around the edge. So I don't wanna go too far. I'm gonna pour that in here. We're just about there, but we're going to add a little bit of water to make sure this comes up to 3/4 of a cup. It'll also help us cool down our milk just a smidge. Now we're gonna add our eggs and our egg yolks. I like to do this from a distance to try to cool it off just a little. The temperature should be around 110, 115. You want this to be just warm enough to be cozy for our yeast, not scramble our eggs. Sort of warm to the touch. Adding my eggs. Mix that together. This is 2 eggs and 2 yolks because I like to add a lot of richness to my dough, so that's what the extra yolks are for. It also gives it this beautiful yellow color. Now we can make our dough. So we'll add our all-purpose flour. You can totally do this by hand. It just takes a little bit more work. Granulated sugar. My yeast, active rye yeast. Just putting it right in because this warm milk is gonna warm it up. Kosher salt. We'll mix that up with the paddle at first. Or if you're doing it by hand, you can just use a wooden spoon or a whisk. That's it. And now we'll switch to the dough hook. This is the kneading tool on your stand mixer. Just sort of grip the dough and slap it around the sides and knead it much faster than you could do it by yourself. So now this is my warm milk and egg mixture. Going in. And then we'll let that come together a little bit before we start adding our butter. And the reason I'm doing that is basically just to build up a little bit of structure in this dough before I add the fat. So we have nice, chewy, delicious, bready donuts. The order matters here. Now I'm waiting for all the flour to get incorporated into that dough, most of the flour, before I add my butter. So this will take about 3 minutes in the mixer to come together, or if you're doing it by hand, probably about 6. If your dough is super duper sticky and it's sticking to the sides of the bowl, that means that you need a little bit more flour. You don't want to add a lot, just sort of a tablespoon at a time. My dough's just sticking at the bottom, and that's how I know it's the right texture. So now I'm gonna add my butter a little bit at a time. It's really soft, so it should incorporate pretty easily. This is the part, if you're doing it by hand, gets a little messy. This is the point at which we're building all the gluten in our donut. So you wanna really make sure you mix it enough. This looks great. Ooh, look. Look at this nice, stretchy, beautiful dough. This is an excellent tool for getting all the dough down off the sides of the bowl. And you can see, I'll show you that you know it's done. It's such a nice stretchy dough. It's so nice, it doesn't even stick. So now this little dough baby goes into a buttered bowl. I like to just swirl it around in the butter and then turn it over so that the top is nice and moist. And we'll cover that with some plastic wrap. So now we want to set this dough aside in a warm place to double. That could take about 30 minutes to 2 hours. It all depends on the temperature of your dough, the temperature of your house, so it's better to watch the dough instead of the clock. Look at that, risen and beautiful. Time to use this flexible dough scraper. I love working with dough. Now, at that rising point, you could also let it rise overnight in the fridge. You could let it rise for a couple days in the fridge if you want to break this process up a little bit. We're just trying to get it out to about a 1/2 inch thick. It just has to be big enough so we can stamp out our 6 little donuts. And we're using a 4-inch round cutter. So I have a rim baking sheet here lined with a flour sack towel. But if you don't have that, you can absolutely use parchment. I'm gonna throw a little flour on this too. I don't want them to stick. And we can cut using a 4-inch cutter and then a little 1-inch for the hole. I have a whole set of these wonderful ring cutters. They're so useful. You can cut your biscuits, make scones, ooh, little hand pies. Now we use the little one to cut out our hole in the center. And these actually make excellent little donut holes. It's too good to waste it. How cute is that? If you have kids, this is actually a perfect part to get them involved. Now, put these cute little guys, gentle as you can. Try to maintain the shape, but they were gonna puff up a little bit again, so don't worry too much. They're nice and floured. So this dough, I don't wanna throw this dough away, so I'm sort of pushing it together again. I'm not gonna work it too much, but at this point you could cut out a few more donuts or you could cut this into beignets. Don't waste this dough, it's too good. These are perfectly puffed. So you know your dough is ready to fry when you press it gently and it sort of springs back slowly. If you press it and it comes back really fast, it needs more proofing time. If you press it and it sort of stays indented, you might have gone a little too far. We need a big pot of neutral oil, high heat neutral oil, so like vegetable oil, something like that. We want a couple of inches extra, just for safety reasons. Once you get a couple donuts in there and things are splashing around, you wanna make sure everything is safe. So you want a thermometer in your oil. It should be about 350 degrees. Once you add a couple donuts, the temperature is gonna drop, so you may need to increase your heat a little bit. If you don't have a thermometer, you can sprinkle a little flour in there and see how it sizzles, and that should tell you that your oil is ready to fry. If it's too cold, when you add your donuts, they're gonna sort of absorb too much fat, and if it's too hot, they're gonna burn. So it's kind of a game to keep it up at 350. Right at 350, I'm gonna turn this down a little bit and throw a couple donuts in. I'll put maybe 3 in at a time, just to make sure we're not changing the temperature too much. These will go for about 2 to 3 minutes a side. You'll see they'll get golden brown and puff up a little bit. You're always looking for that little ring of white around the center when you flip them, because that means they puffed in the oil appropriately. Ooh, look at that, perfect. These are really light and fluffy donuts. I'm telling you 2 to 3 minutes aside. It's kind of hard to know exactly if they're done in the center. Sometimes I just cheat and open one up and make sure. You want them to stay nice and golden. Look at that beautiful ring. They're gonna be nice and fluffy. I'm gonna finish frying the rest of my donuts and then we can make the glaze. I like to sift my confectioner sugar and my cocoa powder together because they tend, depending on how long they've been sitting in your cupboard, they tend to have little lumps, and you don't want that in your final beautiful donuts. And it's easy to just sift them together. I'm using Dutch process cocoa powder only because I prefer the flavor and the color of Dutch process. I think it's a little chocolatier, less fruity than natural cocoa powder, but in this recipe, you could use either one. Look at all those lumps. You don't want those in your glaze. Set them aside. And I have my milk. You can add it a little bit at a time so you can gauge how thick you want your glaze to be. I'm also gonna add my vanilla. And if you want it a little thicker, if you've gone too far, you can always add a little bit more confectioner sugar. This already smells super chocolatey. It's a little thick, so I'm gonna add the rest. So I'm looking for a nice smooth glaze. I want it to cover my donuts and maybe drip just a little bit, but not run right off them. It can't be too thin and it can't be too thick. Somewhere right in the middle. Look at that, doesn't that look delicious already? And now I can dip my cool donuts in this glaze and then top it with sprinkles. Our glaze is ready. My beautiful cool donuts. And we also need sprinkles. These are chocolate sprinkles that I actually brought back from Amsterdam because I think the ones they make there are even chocolatier. They're even more delicious. But of course, any sprinkles will do. This is how we used to do it in the donut shop. We just dip. Ooh, and then dip. Look how cute that is. Oh, yum. Okay. This is another part that your kids can definitely get involved. I know Arthur would love to do this, although he would probably just eat all the sprinkles. That's what he usually does. Look at that. Mmm. And if at any point your glaze feels a little too thick, sometimes when it sits a little bit, it gets a little too thick, you can always just add a little bit more milk or a little bit more water and thin it out. I love these. Oh my gosh, they smell so chocolatey. Yum. And I can feel that the donuts are super tender. It brings me so much joy. Look at that. Last one. And now I get to taste one. It's airy and light and pillowy and delicious, and the chocolate, perfect. Just the right amount of chocolate. In this chapter, we learned all the ingredients we need to make chocolate glazed donuts. We learned how to make the dough, how to make the glaze, and how to get that perfect cut and fry. I hope you have fun making these at home.